All right, so we can remove websites. Notice that we had 5 websites. We were able to remove 2 of them, but now we're going to removing these 3 entails also updating the users array. All right, so let's work on that. If we here, when we delete the website from the controller, we're going to the service. The service passes the user ID. It goes on to the service server. Right? It passes the delete website to website ID, and then we do the actual removal here in the model. Yes? Okay. But just like we updated the user when we created the website, right? We have to do something similar, like a mirror image, or undo what we had done when we first created the website. Yes? If you remember, when we created the website, not only did we create the website, but we also told the user model that we were adding this brand new website to its list of websites, correct? So we need to undo that. Right? We're going to remove the website, so we need to remove it also from the user model. Make sense? So let's do that. Now that we've removed it, we are sure that it's no longer there. What we're going to do is that before sending the promise back, right, we're going to handle it locally and say, okay, we know that we've removed the website successfully. And we have some status. We don't really care about that status. What we want to do is use the user model, which we have right here, and we would like to remove that website, right? Remove website, okay, from that user. And here we will need to know the user ID and the website ID. Right? We have the website ID. It's being passed to us here. What we don't have is the user ID. It was not passed to us as an argument. Okay? We could retrieve it maybe from the website model, from the website ID, retrieving the ID of the website and whatnot. But it's easier that it's being passed to us. So we have developer ID as an argument, and that needs to be passed from the service. Yes?
On the requirements, the developer ID was one of the parameters listed for the website. Is it okay if we add it?
Yeah, exactly. Yep. Excellent. So on the service, there it is. We're going to pass it here as well. The developer ID, which we can parse it from the parameters, right? Is var developer ID. It's what? It's in this case, it's the user ID. This user ID. There it is. Let's retrieve it. Request.params dot user ID. It's the developer ID, and we're going to pass it in as an argument. Okay. All right. So here, notice that we have this remove website, which is not implemented in the user model. Right. We'll need to do that. We'll also need to pass in the developer ID as well. Right. And we can just return the user model over here, which notice it'll be the status. It'll be the status of removing the user, not the status of removing the website. All right. So be careful, right? Just like before, we handled here an extra then to make sure we would return what we intended to return. Okay, here we would need to do the same thing. We probably would need an extra then here. But since whatever we're returning is being ignored by the client, okay, we can safely not implement that additional then. All right. But if it meant something to you at the client side, then you should implement that extra then. All right. All right. So this doesn't exist. Let's implement that in the user model. Let's see, user model. There it is. Let's implement this. So we had add website. We're going to have user model remove website. Okay, so let's implement that right here. So function remove website is going to take as argument the same arguments as add website. And what we're going to do is that we're going to fetch the user, find the user by ID, find by ID. We have the developer ID, Now that we have the user, use a user object, we can splice out from the array the ID of the website that we don't want. First, we'll need to find where in the array it is. Right? So we can say maybe index. We can find from the array of websites, index of, and then website ID. So where does this string, right, appear in the array? Once we know where in the array it's in, we can just splice it out. Websites, that's the array. Splice at index. I want to splice out one element. Remove that one element. Once we've modified it in memory, we can now save it back to a database. And we can say user.save, go back to the database and save it. And we'll return the status of that save. Okay, that's a status that's going to go back and bubble up all the way up to when it goes back to the service. Okay, let's try this. Okay, so let's refresh. There's our websites. And let's remove LinkedIn. Let's make sure before we do that we have our website. There it is. We have all three websites. And for PO, it's referencing all three websites. Right? Those are the only three websites. Okay. All right. So let's remove this. Delete. Let's see if we have an error. Okay. Looked like it worked. All right. So the removal of the website, we knew that worked, right? Because we tested that earlier. But let's see if PO was updated. It was, right? Notice that now we have two instead of having the three websites that we had earlier. Okay, makes sense? Again, not that you would implement both sides of this relationship, but oftentimes you have to, especially if you're doing many-to-many relationships, then you would find yourself doing this quite often, right? Where you would find that you have data models where you have certain objects are related to many different objects, right, and vice versa. For instance, actors and movies, right? You can have one actor participate in many movies, and for one movie you have many actors, right? So now you have a many-to-many relationship. Depending on your implementation, you might have to do something like this. Okay? Right, if you remove a movie, then you have to tell all the actors that participate in the movie that movie no longer exists. And vice versa. If you remove an actor, right, then you have to update vice versa. All right. Okay. So now what I'd like to consider is populate. Okay. If for instance we're looking at this and we want to perhaps list the person who created these websites, the user perhaps listed here. Notice that we don't have the websites. The website that come back from the server, right? The array of websites. Notice that the developer, we have the ID. We don't have the username, right? But what if we want to display here the username? We don't have that. We would have to go and fetch the user again, right? And again, that would be very expensive. So let's see if we can use populate to do that instead.